Helena, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Pete?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. To give you your full title, Helena Nield-Dumper. Good morning and welcome to Podcast Journeys.
Thanks.
Recruitment Journeys, not Podcast Journeys. Recruitment Journeys. What an amateurish start. How's things?
Yes, great. Yeah, great. Really happy to be coming out of lockdown here in Melbourne. So things are looking up. The sun is shining. We're on the run up to Christmas. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've just told me that you got your little one off at kinder, so you've got the house to yourself. You're getting some work done.
Yes.
Everything's cool in your world today.
Yeah, it's incredible. She gets in time for breakfast, so loves it. And then it means mommy can come home and have coffee by herself. So that's nice.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, as soon as we're done on this podcast, I'm going to go and sit in the sunshine and have a nice coffee somewhere as well in one of those Malvern cafes. But Helena, thank you so much for being involved in Recruitment Journeys, not Podcast Journeys, Recruitment Journeys, the podcast series. I wanted to invite you on because you've recently wrote a book, Helena.
That's right.
What is the name of the book?
So it's called The Mindful Recruiter.
Okay.
And it was, I guess, written because what I was doing was during lockdown, I was often thinking about the recruiters that had been in the office, you know, in this big, exciting environment. And then suddenly everybody was now locked away in their bedrooms or lounge rooms. And it really sort of went, oh my God, that would be tough. And I always knew I was going to write a book. I didn't think I'd be doing it at 38. I thought it'd be 75. So here we are. Thank you, lockdown. This has brought everything forward.
Hey, so many silver linings from COVID, right? So many.
Yeah.
You know, obviously there's plenty of horror stories from COVID as well, and we all know what they are. But I think when all this is said and done, I think we're all going to reflect and look back at all the positives that have come out of COVID. And of course, one of them is your book, which we will obviously come back to. Look, I'll just quickly introduce Recruitment Journeys. As it says on the tin, it's all about the journeys of recruiters. We specifically talk to selected recruitment identities from the Australian recruitment industry and talk to them about their journey, where they started and where they've ended up at. We've obviously spoken to Tom, your husband, in a previous discussion. And what we do, Helena, we kind of put everybody in a box, in a category, and we kind of focus on a certain segment of your career, of your life, of your journey. So for the purpose of this conversation, we are calling you the recruiter helping recruiters overcome burnout, which is something in our industry that we regularly talk about because we do all run around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And and that's not healthy, right? And you're addressing it, you're tackling it head on, not only in the work that you do, but in the book, and we'll come to all of that. Yeah. But before I can stop waffling, in your own words, would you mind introducing yourself, Helena?
It's not waffling, it's all helpful. So I'm Helena Nield-Dumper. So my company's Attentive Minds. I'm a mindfulness coach and I specialize in recruitment. I've worked across other industries, but I really feel recruitment is where I can help the most based on my own experiences in recruitment. And a lot of my business is built around, I wish I had this stuff when I was in recruitment. And that's sort of how a lot of it has been inspired, similar to the book as well. It's always sort of going back to when I was there. If I had this little bit that might have helped with, for example, sales calls or listening, all these different things. And it's only as I came across mindfulness later on, I went, that's what I needed back then. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, like in a sentence or a couple of sentences, whatever, in language that I understand and possibly some of the listeners, I think I know what mindfulness is, but I've got my own definition. But what is it from in the words of you, an expert? What is mindfulness?
Yeah, well, it's basically it's described as present moment awareness. So what that means is that a lot of the time our minds wander. It's something like 47% of the time our mind is wandering. It's not in this present moment. And when it's wandering, it sort of can go into rumination, it can go into worry, it can go into sort of stress, fear-based thinking. Whereas in the moment, your brain does not do that. It is present with you. It is while you're doing that as well, you're also allowing your whole nervous system to relax and to sort of reset your body while you're in that moment. Now, we often think we are being present, but actually when you jump into your thoughts, you're like, oh no, I've been thinking about something else entirely. I often think of a good example of, you know, if you look at a puppy or a young child, they are always in present moment. They're not thinking about where's my next meal coming from. They're not thinking about, do my thighs look big in this? They're not thinking about any of that. They're just here in the moment. And that's why often we find that we spend a bit of time with children, with animals, that it's quite a calming effect. And that's why, because we're being present with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's kind of similar. And, you know, when people say, when they, you know, I don't know, for example, when they go to the gym and when they're in the gym, the music's blaring, they're in the zone, they turn off. Yeah. They forget about their problems. They forget about what's going on. They forget about the huge pile of emails they've got to get through when they get back to their desk. Yeah. They're in the moment. Is that mindful? Is that
that's a part of it too. But there's also another element of it when you are feeling when you are uncomfortable in a situation. With mindfulness, you can sort of be in it and be okay with being uncomfortable. So it's not just about escaping that sort of discomfort. So, for example, if you're working out really hard in the gym and you just, you know, it's killing you, and all you can think, you know, you think about something else to get you through. With mindfulness, you're sort of more being in there with the discomfort. It's like you can use it it's used a lot for pain management. So if you have a pain, rather than resisting it and fighting it and doing everything to make yourself comfortable around the pain, you sort of embrace it, and you'd be surprised how quickly it sort of comes down a couple notches. So yeah, it can be used for both. It can be used for leaving the moment for a bit, but also embracing it just exactly as it is without trying to change it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's something that I would love to understand more. I think sorry, we've got into mindfulness very early, very deep, very quickly. It wasn't the intention. But I think that the bit that I struggle with as a parent is that when you're with your kids and you're trying to be with them in the moment, enjoying their company and being the best kind of version of yourself that you can be, but your mind is elsewhere. Yes. I chastise myself because I struggle to do that. That's related to mindfulness, right? Yeah, because again, it comes back to the present moment. And there's so many little techniques you can use, just, you know, they don't even take very long, just to kind of get you back in the moment. For example, you might say, what I find helpful is, if I'm doing the same with my daughter, I start to sort of name what she's doing. She's lifting up a pen with her right hand, just really slowing things down and bringing my attention all to the activity she's doing, or all to what I can see her doing. It's observing her. And for me, that sort of brings me back into that moment with her. Not always, and so many times not, but I think once the intention is there to be present, that's probably half the battle. Okay, it's a good tip. So my 10-year-old is currently wrestling me to the ground and strangle holding me, that kind of thing. That's usually what happens in our house. Right, okay, let's get back to recruitment. Yes. You are obviously a recruiter who has followed this path and this vocation, but you started as a recruiter. I ask everybody this question, Helena, but how and why did you break into the wonderful world of recruitment? So I came to Australia, maybe it was 2009, and 2011 I started working in recruitment. I was working as an educator for Randstad on the temp books, so I was aware of recruitment and what it was all about. A role came up in Randstad education, and I went for it, and you know, after a few interviews and a few rounds, I got it. I was very green, I was very naive at the start, and but I absolutely loved it, thrived in that sort of environment. So really went from being a Montessori teacher to recruitment, which is very different. So a whole new set of skills were needed. And yeah, so I was there. I started as a consultant and then became senior consultant after maybe 7 or 8 months, and then became team leader maybe the following year, and did that for 6 months. Okay. Yeah. So how long? So you were there for 3 or 4 years in total? Yeah, almost 4 years. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. And what was the Randstad environment like back in those days? Oh my God, it was brilliant. Loved it. It was, particularly in education, it was, as I said, on a temp desk, it was high paced, high energy.
You know, it was go, go, go. Some nights we were, you know, I'd have to do on call after work just to make sure there was enough teachers in place for the next day. So it was go the whole time. Yeah. By 9 o'clock, because we often start at 6:30, by 9 o'clock, I felt like I'd done a whole day's work. I was like, oh my God, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Pick up and go again.
So were you, even though maybe the phrases of burnout maybe weren't kind of present in your mind at the time, were you seeing it? Were you feeling it? Were you experiencing it? When you looked around you, you know, you talk about that frenetic pace and everybody, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning feel like I've done a full day's. I mean, that sounds like you were going hammer and tong. So were you subconsciously exposed to burnout and seeing it in the environment that you were working in at the time?
Yeah, you raised a good point. I do remember hearing the word burnout back then, but I just never associated with me or anybody that I knew. It was only later, I moved into a HR role after Randstad with RMIT training, but it was only sort of in that next role that I look back and went, oh, I was actually burnt out. I had no idea, because I was so far in it, I couldn't even see sort of the, you know, the wood from the trees, as they say. So I feel like it probably began somewhere between senior consultant role and the team leader role. And when I moved into team leader role as billing team leader, it was what I wanted. It was the path I'd chosen. But when I got there, I just couldn't keep up with the pace. So I still was, you know, billing really high hours, was performing really well on the outside, you know, had got the company car and had a raise. So everything looked hunky-dory as far as other people could see, I'd imagine. But I was starting to notice a bit of a difference. I was just the tasks that I would do in the blink of an eye started to become a bit harder. My attitude started to change. So it was happening in me. But again, I couldn't even, I wasn't even able to articulate what it was at the time. I just knew it didn't feel great. However, instead of doing anything about it or knowing what to do, I just pushed through. That was always my attitude. Just get through.
But even if you were able to categorize it and recognize it for what it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably wouldn't have wanted to say something, right? Because we weren't, in our industry back then, it was a badge of honor. You know, if you were working hard and working yourself slowly into a grave, it was kudos to you because you're working hard. You know, we don't want to hear that you're struggling. Was that how you felt it?
Yeah, probably. There was probably an element of that too. Just because, you know, that's just the industry it was, and it was sort of a do or die. You just needed to get on with it. Otherwise, it slowed everything down because we worked in teams. So if I slowed down, it affected the next person. So it wasn't just my own desk I was affecting, obviously my team as well. So it was a bit of that, but also now looking back in hindsight and knowing about mindfulness and meditation, there was so much more I could have done for myself. I just didn't know that I could do it, if that makes sense. So I think little things, if you can take ownership a little bit of what you can control, and whatever about the industry you're working in, that is what it is, sort of a thing. But yeah, so I think it was a bit of both.
So okay, so this is interesting. So your interest and your passion for mindfulness and helping recruiters avoid burnout comes from personal experience. Yeah. Okay. Do you think burnout in our industry is inevitable for most?
I'd like to think not. I think because things have really changed, and you know, we're having these conversations. Like you and I met, I think maybe 3 years ago. We were having this discussion back then, but I feel like it's opened up so much more that the awareness is getting there. So I don't think it's inevitable, but I do think the ability for companies to be much more supportive and open to ways to sort of help their people will be the difference. And also for the people to take up what's been offered as well. It's all well and good to put all these programs in place, but if the consultants aren't going to take it on board, you know, it has to come from both sides.
Yeah. It's again, you're the expert, but I see that burnout only affects certain people. You know, certain people who run at a million miles an hour. I've been in recruitment for longer than I care to think about, and I actually don't think I've suffered from burnout.
Wow. Yeah.
However, I've suffered from other things, just burnout wasn't one of them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because I don't know, maybe I always just held back a little bit. Maybe I haven't been working hard enough, but I've felt pressure, and I've certainly felt anxiety associated to my job. But never, I don't think burnout. It's probably just one of a different selection of problems that exist in our industry, and indeed any industry, right?
That's it. And you might have, maybe experienced some of, like, a percentage of some of the symptoms, but because burnout is really, it is anxiety prolonged, it is stress, chronic stress. It's not just a few bad days or a few bad weeks. It's actually something that's quite continuous and gets worse before it gets better, if that makes sense. Whereas I think with recruitment, it has natural peaks and troughs anyway, which affects our emotions and our ability to regulate ourselves. But the burnout is more, it's more of a long-term thing.
Okay, so let's talk about burnout and what it looks like. How would somebody know? How would a recruiter know if they were suffering from burnout? To a point that it needed to be addressed. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's hard. Well, I found it hard to recognize it in myself when I was in it, but that's probably just the way, that's my personality. Anyway, it's only afterwards I look back. But there's things that I now see that were really clear. So as I mentioned, the small tasks that I would do just felt really big. If I was, given any other sort of complex thing just to work out, it just felt, I think was, for me, it was the emotion in terms of, I guess I was tired and anxious and that sort of stuff. So it's physical, it's emotional, and also performance as well. So, you have a high performer, then suddenly just gone down a little bit. And you can kind of put that down to the market, you can put that down to various things. But if that goes on in a long term, there might be something actually going on there with if you can see it in somebody's performance. And then physical, it can manifest in headaches and stomach aches and often unexplained stuff. So I've, even my years in recruitment, I saw colleagues go to doctors for various things and could never find an answer to what it was, if it was stomach or if it was head. I just feel the body just needs to express itself. If you don't, express it verbally, it'll just show up in another way. And that's why people often get sick, especially after this year as well.
So I'm curious to know, I've steamed up for some reason, Helena. This is weird. This is a first. I've never steamed up in a live podcast before. What was it? Maybe it's burnout. I'm curious to know. In obviously, COVID was a really weird time, and you could suggest that we all in the recruitment industry, certainly for a period of time, for that 3 or 4 period, we almost took it back a gear, right? Because there wasn't anything going on. Can burnout still exist in a time when there isn't much going on?
Definitely, yeah. Which it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can, because there's all this underlying fear, underlying worry, underlying, will I have my job next month? While trying to, navigate as a consultant, trying to navigate their new life working from home, plus family pressures. Yeah, so although it doesn't look like they're going 90 miles an hour, their mind could still be working more busy than they are, if that makes sense. So yes.
Yeah. So do you think COVID would have increased or decreased?
I think it would. I think it probably did increase in the end. Also, people weren't taking holidays because there was, especially in Melbourne anyway, there was nowhere to go. So there was not a lot of leave taken, I'd imagine. So therefore, that sort of built up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So going back to your own personal journey, at what point did you feel or choose to make this your vocation and to essentially walk away from your career as an educator, your career as a recruiter, and then focus wholeheartedly on mindfulness?
Yeah. When I took a class in mindfulness, because I decided I was going to do meditation teaching. That was pretty clear. That was going to happen. But it was the first class that I took with this particular company, and the guy got us to stand up and do some mindful movement. So all along, any meditation I'd ever done was always sit down, don't eat for an hour beforehand. Don't scratch, don't cough, don't just sit straight, keep your feet. It was very, very restricted. And I did that for quite a long time, and it had some long-term benefits, and it definitely did help me throughout my career in recruitment. But what I found was it was the moment by moment stuff that was missing. And here I was in this first class, this guy was like, yeah, get up and stand up now and do some mindful movement. I was like, oh, okay, this is different. This wasn't allowed before. So suddenly this kind of world opened up, and it was that very first class I went, this is what was needed. This is what I needed back then. Yeah. So then that just built, so I did that course and built on that, and then I really started to explore, what does this look like for me now, and what could it have looked like for other recruitment consultants, and really started to target down the moment by moment stuff. For example, after you hang up after a sales call and it didn't go well, and it's kind of put you in a bit of a rubbish mood, and then that kind of affects the next half an hour of your work, your productivity, and it's wasted, really, So what could you do in that moment to sort of reset and pick yourself back up again? And that's the stuff that I love. That's those little moments that make a difference for the rest of the day, which obviously then affects your productivity and billing long term. So that's,
that reset piece is so interesting, isn't it? Because you can, I really struggle with bad news in recruitment, right? So you've worked so long and so hard on a particular deal. I had one yesterday, and then you get the phone call, and you hold your breath and you're waiting for the news. It's either going to go your way or it isn't. And I've had 3 calls this month that haven't gone my way. It's been a crappy month, and you say to yourself, somebody actually said something to me recently which was pretty powerful. They said, when these things happen, they're going to bother you, of course. They're going to put you in a bad mood for a couple of hours. But in that moment, stop and think, will you still be thinking about this in 6 months' time? Will this affect your life? No, it won't.
No.
So move on. Because, I don't know, I can allow things to just get in my head and build up. And so that reset that you talk about is something that I'm always looking for. Can't find it.
Yeah. But that's really good. So you have just, even that one sentence has helped you. So you've worked that out, that will actually help you. And that's what mindfulness is sometimes too. It's not always breathing or whatever. It's actually going, okay, that question worked really well. For example, with performance, you might say, if you want to improve your performance, you might just check in a few times during the day. 2 questions. What am I doing? Am I doing it well? And then you'll sort of get a gauge where you are. So sometimes you might be like, what am I doing? Oh, I'm scrolling on Facebook. And then you're just becoming aware much more frequently. And then again, you could do something similar, after the phone call, you might check in with yourself. How am I feeling? Is that how I want to feel? Is there something better I could be doing with my time? It's that kind of almost coaching yourself is really helpful.
So when you started going into, so you would go basically into recruitment businesses. Once you launched your business, you would go into recruitment businesses and you would consult with them around everything mindfulness related. Yep. How did we as an industry respond to your teachings? Can I be blunt? Did you often find yourself in a room with, 15 consultants, and the managing director has organised Helena to come in, and the 15 consultants have walked in thinking, what the hell are we doing here? What is this mindfulness all about? Did you ever find yourself in that kind of situation? But once they listened to what you were saying, the penny dropped and suddenly they were hanging off your every word. How did we react to what you were teaching us?
I think by the time, I was in the door of a company, it was a pretty good start, because obviously I've spoken to the director and we had a conversation, and they would have thought it was something that would have aligned pretty well with the company. So more often than not, what would happen is we get the whole group, we might get 25 to 30 in the room, and then by a couple of weeks you might get less. This is standard across most meditation groups anyway. That's just the way we are wired as humans. We want to do something, we don't always follow through.
It applies to everything. It applies to gym memberships, everything. Yeah.
Everything. But what I love is that it's the ones that are still there at the end, and it might be only half the group, which is totally fine, but they are the ones that they are making the changes throughout their life. And they're the ones coming back every week saying, guess what happened this week? Or, and it's often small changes, but it's so significant for them. And then it sort of sets them on a trajectory for something different. For example, there's one task I get people to do. I think it's about week 3, and it's so everybody picks one out of a hat. So for example, we might say, Pete, this week I want you, every time you see a red traffic light, I want you to take 3 deep breaths, right? And that's your task. And what that is doing, obviously, from a physiological point of view, is it's calming down your nervous system. It's helping you get some clarity. It's sort of bringing you back into the moment. So that's your task. Somebody else, I might say, every time you see the McDonald's sign, think, just do a body scan or something. So there's always these different little triggers. And then one of them is, for the next 24 hours, do not complain. And this is brilliant because it's quite difficult for us.
That would be so hard for me.
But it's really, really interesting one. And there was one girl that she did, I wrote this in the book as well, but there's one girl, she did it. She got quite nervous. She was like, she's quite a really positive, quite bubbly person, and not somebody I would have seen, as a complainer, but she thought she did a lot. So she was worried about it. So we said, right, well, let's get a accountability partner involved. So he's, stepped in and helped out as well. And he was sort of there for her when she was, about to complain, or he knew her well enough to say, maybe just check in. So that was really about awareness of thoughts, because we don't complain without having the thought in our minds beforehand before it comes out of our mouth. And then the effect that can have. And I suppose, long story short, but anyway, it sort of changed her, it changed her perception, I think, amongst her peers, because suddenly she wasn't gossiping in the same way she used to. She wasn't having those same conversations. She found at the start she was being a bit more silent, because if she wasn't adding to the conversation, she just couldn't say anything. Anyway, she kept it up over time. So I think that was quite a fascinating one to see that turnaround in her. So there was that one. What else? There's been a lot. A lot of change.
I love it. I find it fascinating. I really do. It's it's something that I know I need to practice and get better at. A good start would be maybe just buying your book, right, and just reading the book. But let's talk about the book. So it was always in the back of your mind, but COVID brought it to the forefront. Can you talk us through that again?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I started in July, I think, and got the content done after 58 days. I just got stuck in, got it done, which was great.
Sorry, hang on, just going back a stage. How did you know how to write a book?
I found a course. I found a really good guy to show me how to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, his name is Joshua. And his challenge was write a book in 30 days. And I said, yeah, right, you're crazy. Anyway, I didn't do 30 days, but I did 58, so I'll take that.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. So you basically just come home, just do what you had to do, get your baby to bed, and then just go and lock yourself away, or? It
was, so I'd get up in the morning before Fern woke up, and then she used to nap, so we'd do it across her naps, and then again in the evening.
That's amazing.
It was really good, really. Sorry?
The discipline that must have been involved.
But also a very supportive husband.
Good on him. Good on him.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you got the book done in 58 days. But it was brought about because of COVID. You just thought that now is the right time to do it. Yeah,
now is the right time. Yeah. Even in the introduction, I mentioned what I thought about the recruiters sitting at home, working from home without having that camaraderie, and how much I really value that when I did work in recruitment, and have that taken away, it must be quite tricky. And that was it. But yeah, so the book goes into different things like, so mindfulness is quite broad. It's basically, as I said, it's like a vehicle that will take you from A to B. A to B is never a straight line. It's often zigzags up and down, but it will eventually get you there, whatever you are looking for. So for example, we use visualization, and that's really powerful. When people, especially coming into 2021, when you really start to think about goals, think about the future, what does that look like? And then you've got visualization that can really complement that as you go about throughout the year. So I recommend it. This is probably going into a bit too far, but I recommend doing visualization at night because you're saturating your mind with positive thoughts instead of, you know, worrying about the next day. It's sort of giving you that really positive boost as you're going into sleep, and then the subconscious mind takes all that on board. And yeah, it goes into it a bit more in the book. But so it's not just breathing, it's mindfulness is quite broad, and then that's what I want to do, is sort of funnel it in to make it relevant for recruiters for their day-to-day stuff and how they can sort of create their future with different ways.
So how has the book been received so far?
Really well, really well.
Amazing.
Yeah, there's been lots of positive comments, and quite a few people saying, "Oh, thank goodness this has been written. I needed this. I just didn't know I needed it," and that sort of stuff. So it's still early days. So I've spoken to a few people that have gone through a bit of it, but nobody that's finished it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited because it will actually make a difference if people use the exercises in it. There's 27 exercises. So yeah.
Amazing. I'm going to get one. Do you think, you touched on this earlier, but do you think that we are, as an industry, we're just generally getting better at being aware of, you know, how important what's going on in our mind is, and being aware of others, and just being more empathetic and supportive, and you know, there's all this talk about, you know, flexibility and work-life balance and mental health and recruitment. Just generally, we're just improving, aren't we? We're just finally the penny's dropped.
Yeah, definitely. Even from when I started 3 years ago, I think there's been a huge shift, and I think it was even happening last year, but obviously with COVID, it sort of, you know, pushed everything forward again. But it's great because I think you know, there's been a missing piece, and I guess that is the whole mind part of it, in terms of we have this amazing resource here that if we only tune into it, we can make it work with us instead of against us. And people are starting to open up to that. And yeah, recruitment definitely is, because I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen the difference. Yeah.
How do you think, this is a question that everybody's banging on about, but I'm keen to get your views on it. How do you think, and of course, no, we've mentioned Tom a couple of times. Tom is your husband, and he's the co-managing director of PSP, Design and Build. So he'd have a view on it. I'm sure you've chatted with Tom about it, but how do you think the recruitment industry is going to look post-COVID? Or how's it going to be different post-COVID?
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested to see how the whole hybrid thing is going to work. So people working from home, people working in the office, and how that's going to, I guess from a mental health point of view, I'm looking at that, but how that's going to go. It'd be fascinating to see if that's going to make a difference in terms of how that shift is going to be. Yeah. And I guess things like having people in for the core hours, will that mean that people are putting more energy and more effort in while they're in the office, and then, you know, doing the other stuff outside? It'll just be interesting to watch.
There's so many things happening that just, for example, I'm representing a lady at the moment who lives in Queensland. She wants to work part-time. She wants to work in the Sydney, Melbourne market. And I said to her, if we'd spoken pre-COVID and you told me that you wanted to work part-time from Queensland into the Sydney or Melbourne market, I would have very politely said, sorry, I can't help you. But because the world has changed, I've got 4 businesses very, very interested in her.
Wow.
Because people are just, their mindset has just completely changed.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So what next for you, Helena? The book's done. Is there another book in the pipeline, or are you just going to go back to focusing on your business? Yeah.
So back to focusing on the business. So with the book, I'm obviously going to keep advertising that and just trying to get as many recruiters across that in other countries as well as Australia, of course. In January, so the 18th of January, I'm launching a course on how to overcome burnout in recruitment. It's going to be a challenge, a mindfulness challenge.
Yeah.
That's next. And then following that, I'm probably going to do another course on call reluctance in terms of, again, from a mindfulness point of view.
Yeah.
So it's really starting to look at challenges within the industry and how I can help from one aspect, this aspect, and the mind is just a huge part of it. So that's what's coming up. And then of course I'm working one-on-one with people coaching, and then within companies as well, which has now shifted mostly, as you said, to online. So that's, it's been great.
Okay, plenty going on then. Okay, so if there's anybody watching this and everything that you're saying resonates, whether they just be recruiters or recruitment leaders, how do they find you? How do they find your book as well?
Yeah, my book is on Amazon. So if it's in Australia, it's .com.au. And I'm on LinkedIn, so Helena Nield-Dumper, and my company is Attentive Minds. So LinkedIn is probably the best way to get me. Okay,
all right, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's genuinely, authentically, really interesting for me. I know that this is something I need to focus on going forward. So I'm definitely going to go and buy the book. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
All right, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Helena. Take care.
See you, Pete. Bye.